Have you ever found yourself saying yes when inside everything in you was screaming no? Have you ever smiled to keep the peace even when you were about to crumble inside? Maybe you are tired, exhausted, but you don't exactly know why. There is a type of suffering that leaves no visible marks, a silent, persistent pain, hard to name. It arises when you start betraying yourself every day, one gesture at a time. Act as expected. You modulate your voice, choose the right words, hide what you feel, all to avoid bothering others, to not disappoint, to be accepted. You adapt. And for a while, it even seems to work. People like you. You become reliable, pleasant, predictable. But behind this perfectly constructed social mask, a void begins to emerge, a discomfort that grows slowly, a feeling that something in you is being forgotten, left behind, suffocated. Carl Jung called this mask the persona. It is necessary. We all need it to navigate the world, to participate in social life. But there is a real danger when we stop wearing the mask and start to become the mask. When we forget that behind the character, there is a real person with desires that don't fit, with anger that isn't polite, with thoughts that aren't pleasing. When this happens, something begins to break inside. You feel it, but you can't explain it, as if you were living someone else's life, as if you were an actor on a stage where the play never ends. It is not about becoming a filterless rebel, nor about abandoning all forms of coexistence. It is about something deeper, recognizing when the need to be accepted is distancing you from who you really are. It is about stopping to look inward and facing the truth that you have been living more to please than to exist authentically. And believe me, this kind of self-abandonment comes at a cost in the form of anxiety, identity crises, resentments you don't know where they come from, and a deep, silent sadness. Let's confront this destructive pattern of living for others. Let's understand what Jung discovered about the relationship between the ego, the persona, and the unconscious. Let's explore why the compulsion to please is not just a personality trait, but a symptom that you are disconnected from your essence. And most importantly, let's begin to trace the path back to yourself. From an early age, you learn to behave, to hide what you feel so as not to hurt others, to control your impulses so as not to seem selfish, to smile even when you wanted to disappear. You learn that to be accepted, you needed to be convenient. And thus, without realizing it, you shaped a socially acceptable version of yourself, a persona. The persona, as Jung described, is a psychic construct, a kind of character we create to interact with the outside world. It is important, even necessary. It is thanks to it that we can work, participate in groups, and live in society. The problem begins when we stop seeing the persona as a functional mask and start to believe that it is who we are. You act as if you are always calm, even when you are boiling inside. You become the person who is always available, always helpful, always balanced, because that is the role others have learned to expect from you. But the truth is that every time you pretend to be okay when you are not, every time you ignore your anger to avoid conflict, every time you say it's fine when everything in you says it isn't, a small piece of you is silenced. This continuous repetition of internal denials creates cracks, and these cracks accumulate over time. The person behind the mask begins to disappear. You no longer know what you really want. You can no longer identify what you feel. Your desires become confusing. Your decisions automatic. You live according to what others expect, not what you believe or desire. The persona ceases to be an adaptive tool and transforms into a psychic prison. The cruelest part of it all is that on the outside, everything seems to work. You receive compliments, people trust you. You seem successful, functional, even happy, but inside, something is dying. The mask has become skin, and you no longer know how to take it off without losing everything you have built. But is maintaining this image worth the price of giving up yourself? How many times have you stayed silent to avoid confrontation? How many times have you regretted saying yes? How many times have you smiled on the outside and screamed on the inside? The truth is that the persona should never command your life. When you identify too much with this role, you begin to live as a shadow of yourself. Over time, this disconnects you from the soul, the living center of your existence. It is exactly at this point that something inside you begins to rebel. This rebellion has a name: internal conflict. There is a war happening inside you, and the battlefield is invisible. On one side is the ego, the conscious part of your psyche that seeks adaptation, recognition, stability, and belonging. It is the ego that wants to keep its social image intact, that fears rejection, that tries to control everything to ensure you continue to be accepted. On the other side is the unconscious, deep, symbolic, wild, and unyielding. It wants truth. While the ego tries to keep the persona functioning, the unconscious begins to react. It does not send clear words, but subtle signals: diffuse discomforts, disproportionate emotions, unexplainable physical sensations. You feel anxious for no reason, irritated by small things, tired even after sleeping, sad even when everything seems right. These symptoms are just the beginning. They are the muffled cry of the soul being ignored. Jung said that when the ego distances itself too much from psychic totality, the unconscious begins to compensate. It is like an internal scale trying to restore balance. The more the ego insists on maintaining appearances, the more the unconscious reacts with intensity. If you push the persona too hard, the unconscious responds with the shadow, the repressed parts of yourself. The shadow, when ignored, does not disappear. It seeps into your automatic behaviors, your relationships, your self-destructive choices, and your constant feeling of disconnection. This psychic conflict generates a state of chronic tension. You try to keep everything under control, but something always slips away. You do the right thing, but feel empty. You act as expected, but feel anger, contempt, fatigue. This bottled up anger is not directed at others, it is directed at yourself. Each time you portray yourself to be accepted, you disappoint yourself. The pain of this does not appear all at once, it accumulates. It devours your vitality from within. It is a corrosion of the soul. The problem is that this conflict is not visible. People look at you and say you are fine. You smile, do your work, manage everything, but inside you no longer know what you are feeling. You only know that something is wrong. You can continue to ignore these signals, keep saying it's just a phase, keep trying to adapt, but the price is high. An existence without authenticity, purpose, or soul. This corrosion of the soul does not happen in a vacuum. Jung identified psychological patterns that make some people more vulnerable to losing themselves in the persona. Among these, the extroverted feeling type stands out. A personality structure deeply attuned to others' emotions and expectations. For this type, social harmony isn't just a preference, it's a lifeline. Their sense of identity and security depends on external validation. They enter a room and immediately adjust their behavior to please, avoid friction, and ensure acceptance. On the surface, this looks like empathy or kindness. But when taken to extremes, which it often is, it becomes self-betrayal. The extroverted feeling type lives for approval. Their moral compass is outsourced. They prioritize external values over inner truth. They might advocate for ideas they don't believe in, stay in suffocating relationships, or accept toxic situations, all to maintain the illusion of harmony. Their central question isn't, what do I want? But what do they expect from me? This inversion of priorities inevitably leads to collapse. No one can please everyone forever. Each rejection, criticism, or perceived failure feels like an existential threat. Worse, this type often doesn't realize they're betraying themselves. They confuse being loved with being useful. When they're not playing the role of the helpful, pleasant, understanding person, they feel worthless, as if their existence has no justification beyond serving others. But this dynamic isn't exclusive to one personality type. It manifests in anyone who says yes to avoid displeasing, who silences their opinion to dodge rejection, who minimizes their pain to avoid burdening others. Every time you prioritize acceptance over authenticity, you feed the same psychic wound. The unconscious rebels against this self-abandonment. It doesn't speak in logical arguments, but in symbols, dreams, and bodily sensations. You might dream of being naked in public, exposed, essence, chaste, internal pressure, or trapped, soul imprisonment. Your body protests with unexplained pains, chronic fatigue, panic attacks. These are not random. They are desperate attempts to pull you out of autopilot and force you to confront neglected truths. Compulsive behaviors emerge too: overeating, overspending, overworking. These are distractions to avoid silence, because in silence, you might hear the soul's whispers. Facing these truths hurts. It hurts to admit you've built a life disconnected from your desires. It hurts to realize many choices were made from fear of rejection, abandonment, invisibility. But ignoring these signals only intensifies them. The psyche demands wholeness. Jung called this process individuation, the soul's journey toward integrating all parts of the self, even the denied or repressed ones. It's not about perfection, but authenticity. It requires confronting the shadow, the anger, pride, need for control, or emotional voids you've hidden. Individuation isn't about destroying the persona, but ceasing to mistake it for your entirety. This path is neither easy nor linear. It demands courage to disappoint others' expectations, to relinquish superficial praise, and to seek inner coherence. You might lose relationships, status, or comfort, but what you gain is immeasurable: your soul, your voice, your will. Freedom doesn't come from others' approval, but from self-approval, from standing by yourself unconditionally. The journey begins in small rebellions: saying no, voicing an unpopular opinion, prioritizing your needs. Each act of self-honesty weakens the persona's grip. Over time, you rebuild your life from the inside out. The ego and unconscious cease their war. Instead, they collaborate. The persona becomes a tool, not a prison. But this transformation requires patience. The unconscious communicates slowly through recurring dreams, synchronicities, or intuitive nudges. Learning its language means embracing uncertainty, sitting with discomfort, and trusting that the soul knows the way home. In the end, peace isn't found in external validation, but in the alignment of your inner and outer worlds. You realize you weren't born to play a role, but to live fully, fiercely, authentically. The persona may grant societal survival, but only authenticity grants life. If this resonates, you've already begun. The discomfort you feel is the soul stirring. Comment below with what moved you. This act of sharing is a commitment to your truth. The next step? Dive deeper. Watch the next video. The path of self-acknowledge, once started, cannot be stopped. It can only be embraced. The truth liberates, but only when faced fully. Your revolution starts now.